Welcome to the Grillcast, the only podcast in the whole entire world dedicated to radical centrism. I'm your host, Orion, and joining me today is one of the most prolific internet trolls in history, a man who did his time for it, imprisoned for 9 years. Some would say, falsely, some would say that it should have never happened, that he's an innocent man. We're going to go over his life story today and how he got here. Fresh out of jail, we got the infamous Joshua Goldberg. How are you doing, buddy?
Living the dream, or at least trying to.
Yeah, all you can do sometimes. And before we really get into the nitty gritty, get down to brass tacks, I'd like to make a couple of shout outs. So, first of all, to the government agent who's assigned to listen to this, I'd like to invite you to join our Gum Road. We actually have a strong federal agent cabal of loyal listeners. We have a lot of federal agent listeners. We are friends to the feds. Maybe you can compare a note with some of our listeners there. Please remember, Mr. Federal Agent, like and subscribe. I'd also like to shout out our Gumroad members. Because of you and your financial contributions, we're able to buy our guests today a microphone and make this possible. To make it possible for our friend Joshua to get his story out there, because we have a lot of really interesting stuff to dive into. So, Joshua, our podcast, the Grillcast, we're not usually the kind of podcast that asks Jewish people about their early life, but I'd like to start off by asking.
Well,
about
for the record,
hold on.
for the record, I'm only half Jewish on my mother's side. I mean, not on my mother's side. I'm only half Jewish on my father's side. Judaism is passed down from the mother, so technically, I'm not a Jew. I'm just Jew-ish,
Yeah, just Jewish. Just a little
Yeah.
bit. Like George Santos. So, I'd like to start off by asking, how did you, get into the trolling game? Did you start real early and it developed over the course of years? What was your moment where you got started off?
Well, I would probably have to trace it back to when I was 11 years old, and I don't know if you remember the Internet Movie Database forums. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know that.
Okay, do you remember how many trolls were on there?
Oh, yeah. It was a hotbed.
Yeah, it was something else, especially back in the day around 2006. So I remember seeing a lot of them on there that were trolls, and when you're 11 years old, your brain isn't fully developed, and so one thing that I'm thinking of, for example, is there was one on there that would pretend to be a serial killer, and he would post these incredibly just long, detailed, grotesque accounts of how he was supposedly raping, torturing, killing, and eating little girls, and he even had realistic looking fake pictures to go with them. And I honestly became obsessed with this poster, not in a way like I admired him, but in a way like I thought this guy was a legit serial killer, and I was determined to bring him down, and I posted about him so frequently that other users suspected that I was him, and that sort of pissed me off, because I felt like I was trying to take this serial killer down when I was 11 on the Internet Movie Database. And looking back now, I'm sure everything this guy posted was complete bullshit, but
yeah, probably.
I do
You'd
remember.
hope so.
Yeah, I do remember making a post at one point to try to provoke another user and sort of like trying to imitate the tone of that person who was pretending to be a serial killer. And I don't know why I did that. It's really hard to decipher why you would do something like that, especially when you're 11. But I would say that repeated exposure to that sort of thing online from an early age definitely played a significant role in I suppose you could say, warping my brain.
Yeah, that is one thing with things like that where you get a little bit hyper fixated at a young age. You look at it and you say, this is really interesting. I didn't know people could actually be like that. I didn't know a guy could just post about being a serial killer and piss a bunch of people off. And then you have that feeling yourself where you're pissed off at it. At what point did you kind of go from being the trollee to the troller?
Well, I'd say I made some troll posts on IMDb when I was 11, but I suppose It really started probably when I was around 12 or so. I don't remember. Sorry, I don't know if you remember these sites called YTMND and Gaia Online. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Okay, well, when I was a preteen, I was an incredibly prolific nuisance on both of those sites. I got banned so many times from both of them, and rightfully so. I remember when I was 12, I also ran this list of shock sites, which now I don't for the listeners who don't know what those are. See, back in the day when I was a preteen, the whole culture around trolling was very different than what it is now. It was sort of like nowadays, most trolls are motivated by some extremist political ideology. Back in the day, though, trolling on the internet was basically like tricking someone into clicking on a picture of a gaping asshole. Just childish.
Pure motivation.
Yeah, childish pranks like that were the motivation behind most trolling. And so shock sites were sites like that you would trick people into clicking on, and it would take them to some disgusting picture or video. There was especially a big problem on a site called Slashdot, where it was such a problem with people sneaking links to those sites in that they actually had to implement a thing where it would say what you were clicking on was linking to whenever someone put a link in their post there. But I ran a huge list of shock sites on a site called Blue Wiki, and at one point I even tried to create my own that I named Planet Smileys, and it was an image of someone shoving both of their arms up someone's asshole with a cigarette wedged between one of their arms and the asshole. That was typical shock site material. I found that image somewhere, or actually no, it was the other person running the list found that image and said that it should be used to make a shock site. So yeah, I used that image to register Planet Smileys, but I don't think the site even lasted a few minutes or so. It was a failed attempt at creating a site.
Well, that goes to show the kind of ingenuity that you did with your troll ops from even an early age. They try and put these restrictions on you, say, oh yeah, well, we're not going to let people click those sites that you're trying to trick them with. You took matters into your own hands. You didn't just give up there. You said, no, I will make this random person look at a picture of two arms inside of someone else's asshole because it's funny. And that's a source of motivation for trolling that's been lost. Like you were saying earlier, the pure motivation of just, haha, I made you look at something that makes you gay now, rather than trying to score an ideological own or trying to. It's for the fun of it. It's for the game of it. That's something that's definitely been lost. Would you say that your motivations for trolling changed from the early days? Like, what did you learn worked best, and how did that evolve for you?
Um, that's kind of a tough one. I mean, I'd say that I learned that a number of things worked to piss people off, but I suppose you could say that it sort of escalated from the kind of just small scale childish hijinks to sort of grander operations like the Times of Israel hoax that I pulled off. Actually, I did a Times of Israel hoax twice. The first time was I was pretending to be a far left made up figure named Dinah Silverstein, and then the second time I was impersonating an actual left wing Australian lawyer, but had him write a crazy far right pro genocide screed under his name on the Times of Israel, and that's we talked before we started recording. We talked about the lack of political ideology behind what I was doing, and how really I tried my best to just piss off every single political sect and ideology on the planet, and people, the usual partisan hacks like Arthur Chu and Marcos Melitsas on the far left, along with people like Andrew Anglin and Milo Yiannopoulos on the far right. They tried to project me into their blind and tendentious political dichotomies, tried to paint me as either some far right operative or some far left operative, but anyone with a functioning brain knew that I was simply just chaotic. I was simply the true troll is a nihilistic chaos agent, and that was basically what I was doing online.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about some of these. One thing that I mentioned to you before that you said you'd even said about yourself was it kind of reminds me of Roger from American Dad with how many different personas you had, all in the name of not furthering a political ideology or of trying to make a point or whatever, but just to fuck with people that annoyed you. You trolled posing as a feminist, as a gamer gator, as a Nazi, as a journalist for Times of Israel, like you just mentioned, as an Australian Islamic jihadist. We'll get into that one in a little bit. But what was the motivating force behind having so many different personas? You'd even have them argue against each other and whatnot.
Well, I mean, as the old famous editorial cartoon goes, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And I suppose the thing that's most appealing about being on the internet is that you can be anyone you want to be, especially if, as in my case, you don't really have a strong sense of self identity. You can just create all these other people to be. Like you mentioned Roger from American Dad, there's an episode where he has a mental breakdown and burns down his persona factory, where he keeps all his personas because he realizes that he only creates these personas to fill the hollow hole that he feels inside and his own lack of self identity. There's a song by a band called Hey Ocean that has a lyric that goes, "It's easier to be somebody else when you hardly even know yourself." And that's something that I can very much relate to because I constantly feel like I'm just taking on roles, even in everyday things that I do in real life. I don't really know what my real self or real identity is. I mean, you can see that I've posed as pretty much everything under the sun, but I don't really have that strong sense of self identity that I suppose the quote unquote normie does.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because you are diagnosed with autism and schizophrenia. Yeah, do you think that plays a role in how you approached this?
Well, the schizophrenia diagnosis was later found to be completely inaccurate, and quite
It
frankly,
was
it
just
should.
normies not understanding being a troll.
Yeah, it was.
You'd have
I
to be
mean,
crazy to do that. That's funny, dude.
yeah, I mean, you can tell just from talking to me right now, I'm not schizophrenic. I mean, a schizophrenic person, I know schizophrenia because I was in the psych ward at Butner for 2 years, or was it 3 years? It was too long for whatever long it was. And I was around a lot of schizophrenic people, and trust me, you cannot hide being schizophrenic. You know when someone is
No.
schizophrenic. And the fact that a so-called licensed mental health professional would try to say that I was schizophrenic just shows that they, quite frankly, were lazy and didn't want to be bothered coming up with an actual accurate diagnosis. Just like the psychologist I had on the street who repeatedly blew me off every time I tried to bring up that I thought I had autism to her.
Yeah, they're not always sending their best, as Donald Trump once said. They're not sending their best.
Well, the thing is, most, if not all, of the doctors, whatever kind of doctors they are that work in prison because they couldn't get jobs as doctors on the street. Prison pays far less to doctors. So if you're an actual qualified doctor, you're going to get a job as a doctor on the street. They send their worst doctors to prisons. But even the ones on the street can often be that way, like the one that I told you about, the psychologist who refused to, accept that I was autistic.
Yeah, you have to imagine if you're such a bad doctor that even the Indians that come over here are getting their job instead. Ooh, you're probably not the best psychologist out there. So I wanted to ask you because you mentioned your Times of Israel troll that you did. How did you go about doing that, impersonating a Times of Israel journalist and getting them to publish one of your articles? What was the mechanics behind that?
Okay, well, what inspired me to do that was an actual legit far right editorial that got published in the Times of Israel called "When Genocide is Permissible." If I recall correctly, the guy that did that, his name was Yohanan Gordon, and he was an actual ultra Zionist extremist, and that was up on the Times of Israel, and it caused such a sensation that I thought, you know what, I can way outdo that. So what I did was I took this fucking bleeding heart Australian progressive who constantly tweets about how we need strict hate speech laws, and I took his name and likeness, registered an account on the Times of Israel under his name, and I took some of his old articles from other sites and began publishing those on the Times of Israel, to give it legitimacy, to make it look more real, and then finally I struck, because the thing is, after the infamous "When Genocide is Permissible" article, they started having to manually approve all articles submitted to the Times of Israel. Previously, people would just post them. As soon as you got a blog on the Times of Israel, you could post whatever. So what I did was, the first few paragraphs of that article were just completely bland, mundane observations about Talmudic law. So I got that version published first, the first few paragraphs. Then after it was approved, I edited it to add all that crazy vitriolic pro-genocide shit and saved it. And sure enough, it worked perfectly. I got around the procedure they put in place to try to stop that from happening. I completely circumvented it, and quite easily. And then, of course, I archived it so that it would be around forever. And of course, Bornstein has repeatedly tried to get archive.today to take that off, to get that scrubbed from their site, but he has not been successful in doing so. And then, I also, under his name, I use Twitter ads to send out pro-genocide tweets into thousands of random people's Twitter feeds under his name as well, and then to make him think that jihadists were actually buying this shit, I logged into one of my the fake jihadist account that got me arrested, Australia Witness. Australia Witness sent a threat to Josh Bornstein, which inspired him to write a absolutely laughable piece in The Guardian about how neo-Nazis stole his identity to spew hate on the Times of Israel. So yeah, that was actually, if you can believe it, that was actually one of the only times I've ever directly threatened an individual. In fact, I can think of only one other time, and that was when I was like 11 or 12. I used a library computer to leave a threat on the talk page of a Wikipedia administrator who had banned me from editing. Those are the only two times I can ever think of actually threatening individuals that way.
Oh man, that is a ride. When I listen to you talk about it, like how much preparation that you put into doing these, the different steps you took to make them seem and appear legitimate, the patience that you had doing it, it's part of the art form that's truly been lost to the sands of time. And another thing that I noticed was, you said that he writes his laughable article saying, "Oh, neo-Nazis are coming after me." Did you find that was the case a lot of the time? Whenever that you trolled somebody, whenever they got, that they'd immediately go and blame their ideological enemy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when I did the same type of thing with this crazy far left. I mean far left in some ways. She was. I don't know if you remember the person that actually not tried, that got Tyler, the Creator, banned from entering Australia, and also got Grand Theft Auto 5 banned from Australian stores. A extreme radical feminist named Caitlyn Roper. I had used Twitter ads to send out these anti-transgender messages under her name, which I should clarify are messages she would completely agree with in real life. But regardless, I sent them out under her name to thousands of people's Twitter feeds, and that caused a huge stir about how Twitter needs to tighten up on hate speech and blah blah blah. And she, of course, blamed it on the misogynists and the men's rights activists and the gamers and all that shit. It's convenient to just blame your enemies for especially if you live in this world where it's us versus them in your mind always, and you're the hero, and insert boogeyman here is the villain.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to view the world that way than it is to accept that this random guy all the way across the world who has no ideological motivation of any sort did this just to fuck with you and to fuck with people.
Yeah, we have a word for that on this podcast. It's called the wing cuck. Somebody whose mind is so warped by their political viewpoints that anything they see has to be filtered through that lens. The wing cuck is unable to even grasp the idea that somebody would mess with them just because they don't like them on a personal level or just because it's funny, with nothing to do with their politics. Because whenever they get into disputes, spats, whenever they want to hurt somebody, embarrass somebody, etc., they do it from an ideological level. They don't have the capability to even recognize it as something else. That woman, I forget what you said her name was, but she is obviously a wing cuck.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could not have chosen a more perfect target.
I want to talk a little bit about, you trolling the other side too. One of my favorite troll personas of yours was Michael Slay, writer for the Daily Stormer, European 88 on Reddit, mod of a lot of alt-right subreddits. Can you give us the story on that one?
All right. So the first time I was really ever impersonating a white supremacist, I had an account on Stormfront called Aryan Heights, and that account got banned for stirring up infighting surrounding Christianity. The account was labeled "Wearer of the Holy Beanie" after it was banned, uh, which
I mean, they kind of had a point.
and then years later, I started. I realized how easy it was to post on Reddit. So I registered these white supremacist accounts on Reddit. I think the first one I had on Reddit was Lay Cancerkin, but I had several of them, and eventually, when I first started European 88, he was basically just this straw man racist European. He would make these moronic racist comments, usually with a European nationalist, anti-American slant on major subreddits, and then he would usually get shouted down by one of my obnoxious, jingoistic, flag-waving American nationalist personas like Emily Americana or Nuke Europe. But I eventually developed European 88 into this full-blown, neo-Nazi who ironically became not one of, but the most prominent and well-known neo-Nazi on Reddit, and one of the most prominent on the entire internet. Especially when I see with the Daily Stormer, I realized that Andrew Anglin, he would get almost all of his content from these three online cesspools that no longer exist. One of them was the new, aka news board, on a now defunct 4chan knockoff called 4chan, and the other two were the subreddits R White Rights and R Coontown. And I realized that anytime I would have one of these white supremacist personas post something on one of those subreddits, it would appear on Daily Stormer like half an hour later. So I sent Andrew Anglin an email telling him, I was European 88, gassed the all these other ridiculous Reddit neo-Nazis, and I wanted to write for his site. And he, without any kind of vetting whatsoever, immediately put me on board. So I became Daily Stormer writer Michael Slay. And now, just from a pretty cursory glance at Michael Slay's writing, it's pretty obvious that this is the work of a disingenuous troll and not a sincere neo-Nazi. No genuine neo-Nazi would be circulating a petition for Australia to go to war with Indonesia over the Bali Nine, and no genuine neo-Nazi would seriously bill themselves as an advocate for the extermination of all non-whites. Michael Slay was honestly very reminiscent of a troll band from the 90s that was supposedly white supremacist called Vaginal Jesus, which had bands like which had songs like Back of the Bus and Happy Holocaust and Jesus Was Just a Fucking Jew. It's generally not that hard.
I've actually listened to that band before. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
It's actually it's not that hard to distinguish earnest neo-Nazis from trolls. But then again, neo-Nazis are not exactly the most shrewd and percipient people, so it's pretty easy to hoodwink them, even if you're not really putting that much effort into making yourself look sincere. And even if it's pretty obvious to anyone with a functioning brain that you're a troll, you can still easily hornswoggle them, because at the end of the day, they're morons.
Yeah, that's part of the problem though, is that a lot of Nazis really are that stupid. So
Oh, absolutely.
it can be kind of hard to get a grasp of like, oh, is
And
this guy
like
serious?
And like the thing is, I tried to see like how extreme I could get before they would eventually start to have some moral objections. You know, and they never did. I would publish these outrageous calls for genocide and slaughter and all that shit, and they loved it. They would just eat it up. I would think, finally this is going to be enough for someone to finally say, you know what, I don't think this is constructive. But no, every single time they ate it up, and I suppose it's not surprising because that's exactly the kind of shit they were doing to Jews and homosexuals and gypsies and all the other undesirables during the Holocaust. And that's nowadays they're basically just basement dwellers who fantasize about engaging in that sort of new Holocaust from their mother's basements.
Right. And I did really enjoy the reaction of Andrew Anglin after you got caught for
Oh
this.
yeah,
I think
that was full damage control. That was like, I remember someone while I was in prison, I asked one of my email contacts if the Daily Stormer had lost credibility, and her response was, "The Daily Stormer has lost credibility. LOL." Pretty much anything they post nowadays has someone saying, "Well, you are the guys who allowed Joshua Goldberg to become one of your writers."
I gotta ask you. So when you're in prison, I imagine like the online neo-Nazi and like the prison neo-Nazi, they're like a completely different breed. Did any of the Nazis in prison, were they upset with you at all, or did
Oh
they give
yeah,
a single fuck
absolutely.
about that?
That was actually the incident that led me to have to leave Edgefield FCI because see, they had put me in a cell with a neo-Nazi, and I stupidly mentioned what I had done online, thinking he would find it
Oh no,
amusing,
dude.
and he went and told all his Nazi friends, so they were going to come after me with knives and kill me. So I had to leave that yard, but it wasn't an issue on really any of the other yards. Edgefield was actually the only yard that I had been on that had a significant neo-Nazi presence. There was a Nazi table in the chow hall, and of course, I was sitting directly in front of the Nazi table. The table I was sitting at was the quote unquote good white dude table, which was directly in front of the Nazi table. And the funny thing is, if you're a Nazi on a yard like Edgefield, you're a fake Nazi, just like pretty much all of them are, because that's a yard absolutely filled to the brim with child molesters and rapists and rats. And you're walking around with these people, and by your own gang code, if you're supposed to smash those people on sight. So if you're walking around with them and you're not smashing them, then you're out of the gang. If you go to a penitentiary and you tell them that you spent, however length of time at Edgefield and you're a quote unquote Aryan, they're going to kill you. And so, I mean, that shouldn't be surprising at all. They're all fucking fake. And the thing is, every single one of the neo-Nazis would constantly do drug deals and all other kinds of deals with all the other races, especially the black guys. They would, behind their behind their
Behind their
back,
black.
sorry, yeah, that was behind their back. They would say all that racist shit about, yeah, I fucking hate these. We need to fucking kill all of them. And then they would act like they were totally cool with them the second they wanted drugs from them. And I mean, it's just so fucking fake. They're all so fucking fake, and that's how most racists are. They're too fucking pussy to say that shit to an actual black person's face. Instead, they'll just say it behind their back, and then whenever they want something from a black person or any other race of people that they claim to hate, they'll act like they're totally cool with them and put on this fake face. They're fucking pussies.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I imagine you were on thin ice a little bit with that roommate just being named Goldberg, and then you tell him how he completely destroyed the Daily Stormer.
Yeah, he didn't want me. He didn't want me in his cell to begin with. I mean, and he had gotten me out of his cell by telling the guards, "I'm a certified Nazi. You can't put a Jewish guy in my cell." And yeah, I had gotten moved out of that cell. But then he went and told all the other Nazis on the yard about me, and they confronted me in the chow hall, and I had to leave the yard.
Do you think that they're very serious in their beliefs, or do you think that it just gave them a way to, have something to belong to and some sort of identity in a system that strips you of that by its nature.
Well, like the thing about prison is basically what neo Nazis wish that America were like. Prison is the most racist environment on the face of the earth, and I would not expect it to be anything else because you're stripped down to the bare basics, and so people inevitably revert to tribalism and gang mentality, which, if you were already in a gang, is just second nature. And for these guys who have nothing on the streets, it's not like they have anything to lose. And
Right.
I said before we started recording that prison is the absolute worst of human nature distilled down to its purest, most unadulterated form, which is why anyone that has any experience with the federal prison system or any prison system is a misanthrope. And prison is certainly not the environment to become less of a misanthrope. Even before I went to prison, I had an extremely misanthropic, nihilistic worldview, and prison just made that even worse when I didn't think it could possibly get any worse.
Just completely accelerated that.
Yeah,
I mean, you saw
absolutely.
the worst of human nature essentially, and if you're already going in with the mindset of fuck people, fuck humanity, I imagine that's got to be an accelerant.
Oh, absolutely. And like the guards, as I told you before, are even worse. Or I mean, they come from most prison guards are very broken, very miserable people. They were usually bullied and or abused in the past, and now they want the chance to be the bully and the abuser because they know that they can get away with absolutely anything that they do in prison, and they take out all of their misery and all their insecurity and all of their rage and hatred on us, the inmates, because they know that they have absolute power over us and nobody holding them to account for what they do. And when you give people that kind of unlimited power and there's nothing holding them accountable, they'll just behave like the complete monsters that they really are. And that's very evident on the internet. And of course, it's ironic for me to be saying this, but I think I should know a thing or two about this. The reason people are so horrible on the internet is because the classic greater internet fuckwad theory says that regular person plus anonymity plus audience equals total fuckwad. On the internet, people reveal aspects of themselves that they would never reveal in real life, not even to a therapist. Because they are completely anonymous and they know that they will never be held accountable for anything that they do. So they will just behave like the complete and total monsters that they really are. And you can see that in real life to some extent in prison, but also in things like, for example, look at how UN diplomats act, or look at how Russian soldiers act, or look at how our own soldiers acted in wars like Vietnam. They did that because they knew that nobody was going to hold them account. And that brings out the pure evil and ugliness that is intrinsic to human nature.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see examples of that all throughout history. And the idea that we have, because we have a more polite society now, that we have a society where, you don't say those things or do those things as much as you might have in the past, that we're somehow better, more evolved, more moral of people than we were, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. All of a sudden, we're paragons of morality and virtue. But you get into a system like that where the veil kind of slips and it
Oh,
kind of shows
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
the darker
it
side of.
shows you how people really are behind the thin veil of quote unquote civilization that people portray on the outside. Prison completely strips that away, and you see what people really are, and that changes you, not in a good way.
So I do want to ask you about what got you landed in prison. I know that based off the Wikipedia article itself, you have you dispute some of the findings in that, some of the statements that they make. Wikipedia editors, they're known for being very fair and balanced and not having an agenda at all when they make these articles.
I assume that was sarcasm.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
absolutely.
just making
Yeah,
sure.
Wikipedia editors are like Reddit mods on crack, dude. They're the
Oh,
worst
absolutely.
people on the planet.
They are the worst. I mean, they my most recent attempt to become a Wikipedia editor, I got permabanned for making some wrong think comments regarding gender ideology. They permabanned me instantly, and the person that got me permabanned, you should see his user page. I mean, I could not have constructed a better parody. He says these are his exact words, wants to turn America into a gay communist anime. I swear to God, I can show it to you if you don't believe me.
Dude, it's like I mean that sounds like it would be one of your troll personas, but there are
Yeah,
people that are actually like that. The wing cuck poison that's affected these people's minds, especially the Wikipedia tranny Janny, like they're a cabal. And they're numerous, and they infect each other with this ideology, and they have power in numbers, even though their numbers in reality aren't that big.
yeah,
Like
and
they just get these little corners of the internet, and they're like, "I want to make it a gay space anime."
yeah, and like the thing is, if you look at the comments I made that got me banned, they were so mild. I mean, just the slightest transgression against, what they consider to be good think, and they will just instantly shut you down. It's just, I mean, it's totalitarianism on steroids because they know how flimsy their ideology is.
Right. So I got a little bit in the weeds there, but the trolling project that most people know you for, the one that got you sent to prison, was the Australian jihadist persona that you had. And so the allegations that those fair and balanced, non-biased Wikipedia editors put against you is that you sent bomb making instructions to online jihadists to help them set up a terror attack. And I think that was in like Texas or something. It was for one of those Draw Mohammed events. They wanted to go bomb that.
Okay, well, the thing
Um
with that is, under my Australia witness persona, I had retweeted something that someone else had posted. An actual jihadist, I assume, had posted something about how people needed to attack that Draw Muhammad event, and I just retweeted it as Australia witness. And one of the guys that eventually did attack it saw that retweet, and I also, as Australia witness, posted a map to the event, which actually what linked me to him was he retweeted my map to the event, I believe. But I as Australia witness never actually directly called for an attack on that event. I just retweeted someone else calling for an attack on the event, if I recall correctly. But the thing about that is what the FBI was doing with that whole affair. I don't know if you remember the 60 Minutes piece about it, but they were doing what they claim I was doing, but even worse. They directly egged these guys on all the way up to the actual event itself. It was revealed that there were FBI guys right near the attackers watching them as they tried to attack the event, and these were the same FBI guys that had been egging these guys on the entire time. But it's fine when the government does it, it's not fine when a private citizen does it.
I don't know. That sounds a little outlandish to me. Are you telling me that federal agents encouraged a violent terroristic crime
I
and
know it's
egged
I know
people
it's
on who were
I know it's hard to believe, but
I don't know, man.
suspend your disbelief for a second. And I think in this case, it is very possible. Especially 60 Minutes thinks it's possible as well. I know it's crazy
That's
to think that the feds would do something like that, but
that sounds like a QAnon conspiracy theory to me. All the feds I know, stand up people, white teeth, straight hair, are doing everything they can to help
I
everyone
never
out.
I never thought the feds would do something like that. I mean, it shocked me to the core.
Well, part of it, one of the reasons they went after you was that they say that you sent bomb making instructions to one of their federal honeypot accounts.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, so they claimed to be some Islamic jihadist teenager, and they asked me for bomb making instructions. So I literally Googled how to make a bomb and just sent them the links through Twitter DMs. That was really all I did, was send them the links to the instructions, which were freely available on the internet. And they wanted a place to attack, so I Googled just events and found one that I figured would have heavy security, and it happened to be this Kansas City stair climb event. I figured there would be no way they would be able to get through the security there, so I gave them that event since they were requesting an event to attack. And they needed further instructions on the pressure cooker bomb. So, and I swear to you, this is true. I made a thread on 4chan's K board asking them for instructions on how to make a pressure cooker bomb, and several people posted them. So I just copied and pasted that and sent it to him. And of course, I got banned from 4chan for that post. But I was posing as a jihadist to this guy, so I wanted to make myself look legit to him.
Right. What was your intentions behind sending these out, retweeting the map of the event, things like that, things that kind of took it from a level that was a little bit more playful to one that landed you under federal scrutiny. Yeah, what was your mindset with that? What was your intentions?
Well, I mean, of course, it was incredibly stupid and it was incredibly reckless, and I'm very thankful that no one was actually hurt as a result of it. But what I was trying to do was basically the same type of thing that the feds claim they're trying to do. I was trying to infiltrate these jihadists, and I thought that I could potentially get a job as either a journalist or even law enforcement myself.
And you were very young at this time when you did this, weren't you?
Yes, I was 20 when I was arrested.
Right. I can tell that, you feel remorse for that. You understand that it was a wrong thing to do, but you didn't have intentions of, this sort of thing actually happening. Did you send any of this information to the feds or write a dossier that you intended to send to them? Anything like that that could have helped them?
What do you mean?
Like, you said that you wanted to infiltrate them and figure out what their plans were, that sort of thing. I was just wondering if maybe you'd relayed any information that you had learned from that, to federal agencies or authorities.
Well, I was planning to. I had Googled. I mean, it was found that I had Googled FBI anonymous tip line, and I had that in my search history, and I suppose in my browsing history as well. And I had told there was one person who I had told over Twitter DMs about what I was doing, and I wish they had been able to get those DMs for my trial because it basically would have exonerated me to some extent. I basically said exactly what I told you, that I was posing as a jihadist to try to infiltrate online jihadists in the hopes of eventually becoming either a journalist or law enforcement. But I've now learned that they were not able to get those Twitter DMs for my trial.
Oh, I imagine that, once you were arrested, Twitter just turbo Janny to your account. You probably were unable to get a lot of stuff that could have potentially, exonerated you or been mitigating
Well,
circumstances.
Facebook did, but I don't think Twitter even touched my account, and so it's really a shame that they were not able to get those DMs that would have been so helpful during the trial. And honestly, I had such just terrible defense because I don't know what my lawyer was thinking, but his strategy was not to emphasize to the judge that I was trying to, become a journalist or FBI. That wasn't his focus. Instead, he claimed that I was trying to create chaos, and he even included a 4chan post that I made at one point where I said something to the effect of, "I created a fake jihadist account on Twitter. How can I use it to create as much chaos as possible?" He used that in his presentation to the judge in my defense. And looking back on it now, I have to wonder, how in the world could you possibly think that that would help my defense in any way, shape, or form?
Right. I think maybe I think it would be hard to be a lawyer and defend a case like this because the mentality that you had at the time, it's not one that normal people can really connect with. It would be hard to understand the motivations behind it. Like, I believe you when, you tell me what your thoughts were at the time because I kind of understand that. I've done some, not nearly on the same level. You're kind of a fucking legend, but I've done some trolling too, so I get the drive behind it, and I get what you were going for. So I understand that. I think it might be harder to convince a court who is filled with fucking boomers who could never understand that mindset.
Yeah, and I mean the judge went out of his way to throw the book at me. The plea deal that I had was for 8 years, but this old man judge decides that's not enough and I need to get 10 years, and he gives me an upward departure and increases my sentence from what the plea deal was and puts me on lifetime supervised release, which, if you don't know, is like being on parole parole or probation for the rest of your life. Now, I hope that I will eventually be able to get off of that. You can apply to get off of it after like 5 years, but it's up to the judge to take you off of it. And as long as that motherfucker's still alive, which I mean, yeah, he's old, but I don't see him dying anytime soon. As long as he's still alive, I'm not getting off supervised release.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how long boomers can stick around. They don't
Yeah.
retire, they don't die, they just turn 100 and they're still on the Supreme Court. Like, it's bizarre, dude. Something that's never been seen before. I do want to ask you a little bit more about your time in prison. You said you were in there for, I think, 9 years before you were released.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, about 9 years. So, we talked a little bit about how you were targeted by prison inmates, targeted by staff. You're someone who, clearly you weren't a hardened criminal. You probably stuck out like a sore thumb there. You probably looked like a deer in the headlights when you got there. Someplace you never imagined that you would be. But, you do describe in one of your Medium posts 2 letters from other inmates that you've kept and that you seem to cherish. And, you're a very reclusive person before you went to prison. I imagine you probably didn't have many in person relationships with people, but do you think that being locked up, having to socialize and navigate, this hierarchy that was there, do you think that that had any positive effect on your development? Like, basically, what I'm trying to ask is, like, do you think that there were any positives that came out of your time there? Any ways that you changed that might have been good?
I mean, I suppose it did to some extent teach me how to adapt to circumstances that were unpleasant in real life. And we talked before we started recording about those kites, and one of those cellmates told me that he really liked having me as a cellmate because he felt like I was helping him get out of the criminal mentality and get off drugs, because I was the only person in the prison who didn't have that convict mentality, who didn't care about the convict code, and trying to put on this fake facade of being this macho tough guy. I wasn't like that, and he was trying to get out of that mentality, and that was why he felt like I was, in his own words, helping him grow as a person.
Yeah. Do you think that how did you stay in there for 9 years? And it seems like you remained true to yourself, that you didn't really get dragged down into the criminal mindset. How did you go about doing that? Are you just like a really stubborn, steadfast person? You did mention to me earlier that you didn't really feel like you had an identity, but it seems like, you were able to keep your identity for as long as you were in there.
Well, I mean, I would observe these guys that were, tough shit in prison, that were the shot callers, the yard reps, and all that shit, and I would look at them and I would think, I don't ever want to be like that. These guys are fucking losers. This is all they know. They are completely institutionalized. They may run the yard in prison, but that's not worth shit. Nobody on the street's going to care that you were the shot caller in prison. As soon as these guys get out of prison, if they ever get out, they're going to be right back in less than a month. And even if they last longer than that, they're still not going to be worth shit on the street. Prison is all they know. And you compared it to being king rat of the sewer. I didn't want to be like that. I didn't ever want to be like that. And so I was not concerned about fitting in with the guys that were running things in prison, because those were the last people on earth that I ever wanted to be like. If you fit in prison, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. And I know that you had a really hard time with the guards the whole time that you were there. Was there a point where the prisoners just kind of accepted that you were an oddball out and mostly left you alone? Or was it just the whole time them just, being hard as hell on you and
Yeah, it was
trying to take advantage of you?
pretty much the whole time, yeah.
How did that affect you? Like, I don't know, I imagine that has to be really fucking tough, dude.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, prison is not the environment to become less of a misanthrope. It shows you what people really are, and what people really are is not a good thing.
Do you have any like fun prison stories? Like, some crazy shit that you saw, things that other people did that was pretty funny?
Oh, there's tons. I mean, you encounter just the craziest people in prison. I mean, I'll give you some examples of ones that were actually people that you might have heard of. One was one of my cellmates. I don't know if you know the Merchant of Death, Victor Boot.
Yo, wait, that's the guy from Lord of War.
Yeah, as soon as I got in the cell with him, this was in the shoe at Miami FDC, he told me about how the movie Lord of War was based on him and that he spoke 9 different languages and that he had letters from U.S. presidents. And you would think that someone that was known as the Merchant of Death would be just this terrifying guy, just this imposing presence. But he was more like a caricature of a whiny, anal retentive old Jewish man with severe OCD. He would just bitch and moan about every single petty little thing that I did. He would go, like, for example, he would tattle to the guards about everything. Whenever I would touch something, he would go and scrub it down, like the phone. He would, after I used the phone and then he wanted to use it, he went and scrubbed it down like I have Ebola or something. And he would tell the guards, like I remember one time him telling the guards, he is again saying I am a fucking asshole. And the guard just told him something like, it's just words, man. You know, the kind of shit you would tell to a kindergartner. And it was obvious.
Yeah.
It was obvious they didn't give a shit about any of the stupid shit he was complaining to them about. But he was, I mean, he was so annoying that I eventually had to just get moved into a different cell by myself. And I don't know if you
Wow.
remember. I don't know if you remember R. Kelly getting attacked at Chicago MCC, but the guy that attacked R. Kelly was also my cellmate at one point. Whatever you've heard is probably skewed. What actually happened, or so I'm told, is that R. Kelly. See, this guy Jeremiah Farmer. This guy is batshit insane, and he got so pissed off that the prison kept getting locked down because R. Kelly's family was coming and protesting outside every day, and every time that happened, the prison got locked down. So he's in the office. Farmer is talking to the counselor, and he's talking about how pissed off he is about that. He tells the counselor he's gonna go beat the shit out of R. Kelly, and sure enough, he goes and beats the shit out of R. Kelly, and it makes national
Wow.
news.
Wait, so he did it because his family kept protesting and it had nothing to do with like him pissing on a 15-year-old or whatever. He just hated being locked down and held a grudge.
That may have played some role in it as well, but from what I've heard, it was basically because he was pissed off that the prison kept getting locked down because of R. Kelly, so he figured, you know what, I'm gonna go beat the shit out of R. Kelly. I mean, like I said, this dude is
Wow.
batshit insane.
So when a guy does something like that, a crime that's more renowned, something that people may have heard about, are they treated differently by the other inmates? Like, do they get clout off that? Are they like jail celebrities almost?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, any famous person that's in the music industry that's in prison is going to get completely inundated with, yo, check my mixtape, fam. You know, that type of shit.
Well, I mean
But
the guy that beat him up. Like, does he get any cred for that?
Well, I actually checked to see where he is currently housed. He's housed at ADX, the Supermax, where the Unabomber was held until he died. So, if he has any clout, he's not seeing it right now because he's on 24/7 lockdown.
Fuck, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, but I mean, at least at the Supermax, you get a TV in your cell, so there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty nice, I guess. Could be like the Norway prisons where Anders Breivik has like a PS2.
Oh yeah, I mean Norway. Like the thing about that is they actually try to rehabilitate you. They don't focus on punishment. They focus on rehabilitation, and that's why their crime rate is so much lower than ours. Punishment just creates hardened criminals. You know, these prisons are run by these military fascist types that believe that if they make things as miserable as possible for the inmates and constantly abuse and degrade them, that that'll set them straight. But in reality, it just does the exact opposite, which is why our prisons are such incubators for hardened criminals, while their prisons are so much more successful because they actually focus on rehabilitating the criminals and treating them like they're actual human beings rather than subhuman pieces of dog shit.
Yeah, like look at Varg Vikernes. He came out of prison after murdering Euronymous, and he's he's on the straight and narrow now. He's rehabilitated, I would say.
Oh yeah, and if he were in America, well, of course he would have never gotten out of prison, but
Oh, never.
he would have been, the leader of some neo-Nazi gang in prison, and he would have been carrying out all kinds of acts of brutality, and he would have probably eventually gotten himself killed.
Right. Yeah, it's completely different how it's handled. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit when you were talking about the Lord of War, because that's actually one of my favorite movies. I fucking love Nick cage, and the idea that the Lord of War, what'd you say, Vitor
Victor Boot.
something that
Victor Boot.
Victor Boot, that he's not like a cool stoic badass that just blows shit up and walks away, doesn't even look at it. That he's just like an old whiny Jewish man, because he probably was just a paper pusher, like managerial. He didn't get his hands dirty.
Yeah, and he actually was devoutly Jewish, and he complains that Miami FDC was not a place where you could be a Jew. And what's funny, like it's worth noting, the cell that we were in, it had this fucking giant swastika with white power graffitied onto the wall in pencil, and I asked Boot about it, and he said it must have been put there by someone who believed in white power.
Oh man, that's super funny. Yeah, he got sent back to Russia. I think we traded him away. He must
Yeah,
have been such an
we
annoying.
we traded him for the WNBA player Brittany Griner.
Yeah, dude, he was so annoying. He was such an annoying Jewish old man that we're like, oh yeah, a loud black woman. We'd rather have that.
Get this motherfucker out of our prison. Yeah, we're tired of having to deal with him.
Maybe being annoying as fuck is the way to go through prison. It seems like it worked out for him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some people that are so annoying that they'll leap at any opportunity just to ship them to a different prison.
Yeah. So you've been out of jail for a couple months now, readjusting and everything. And one thing I've noticed about you coming back is that, as soon as you got out, it seemed like you hopped on the internet and started shitposting again. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Like, and the thing is, I'm sorry to continue on, but the thing I noticed is you hopped back on being in prison for 9 years, and you were just immediately engulfed in the culture war. You're going against the trannies a lot right now. I saw that there was some hardcore musician who died who was like a sex pest, and you've been trolling people about that who venerated him, and they're all crying that this fucking diet or whatever. But it seems like you kind of immediately jumped back into it without even like a pause button. Like you immediately understood what was going on, the context of the culture war. How did you do that?
Well, I mean, I had to be caught up, of course. I mean, it's crazy how much the world changes in just 9 years, and especially how much the internet changes. I mean, to put things in perspective, the term influencer did not exist when I was on the street before I was
Right.
arrested. The term doom scrolling did not exist. All these memes like the soy jacks did not exist. So it takes a lot of, and of course these are not high culture things. These are fucking internet trash culture, but that's what I was immersed in when I was on the street. And so regardless of what kind of culture it is, it takes a lot of getting caught up with, because you're cut off from pretty much everything while you're in prison.
Right. Do you think it was kind of second nature coming back to it, even though things had changed? Like, did it feel like natural getting back into it? What was it like when you first got back on online? Which I'm honestly amazed that they didn't put any restrictions on your internet
Oh
access.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like I think that like mainly they seem to just do that sort of thing to the sex offenders.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure they're monitoring the fuck out of you
Oh,
for
I'm
that.
sure. I know every single keystroke I do is being read by some Fed somewhere. But I mean,
Yeah, hi, Mr. Federal Agent.
yeah.
Fucking A, bro. So do you have any plans for the future, or are you retired from the troll game? Do you have any personas that you're mulling around in your head? Because one thing I noticed when I was talking to you, particularly about some of your greatest hits that we got into, was that you sounded very happy when you talked about it. You sounded joyous. You sounded like it was a really good memory that you had, something that you really, look back upon fondly. Is that a part of you that dies, or is that a part of you that you take with you into the future forever?
Well, I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm taking pride in being a troll, because, I mean, you can see where that got me. It got me in prison. So it's not something that, I mean, nobody wants to be remembered as this guy was the king of trolls. That's not something you want to put on your tombstone. So, to some extent, I feel like I need to rise above, that sort of thing, and perhaps become more of like an expert on trolling. Someone that would be giving TED talks and that would be consulting with people about internet trolling.
It is something that's actually a very it's a unique skill set, the one that you fostered, and particularly how adept you were at it. I mean, I think that you could probably monetize it, especially from anything from memoirs, going over your experiences, to yeah, like you said, being hired as a consultant, talking to people and saying, well, this is a mindset that you have to understand this person's coming from when they're trying to get you, when they're trying to fuck with you, when they're trying to burn your house down, your house of cards. This is why they're doing it. This is their mindset behind it.
Yeah, because
It's very unique.
like you said, the boomers, they'll never understand it. They don't get where these people are coming from. So that's why someone like me could I feel like potentially be a valuable resource to these computer illiterate boomers that'll just never understand trolling culture and internet culture.
What was the first meal you had when you came back? Like, you must have been so excited to finally get a decent fucking meal.
Well, I had planned to have my first meal be you're gonna laugh when you hear this. Hot mama, garlic cheesy bread, funnel cake, and cotton candy Fago. But
Cotton candy Fago based.
yeah,
Fucking based.
I did have some cotton candy Fago waiting for me when I got home. But I on the drive home we got all kinds of just random food from stores. We got like different kinds of fruits. We got some ice cream, some other stuff like that. You don't know what you have until it's gone, and like to the person that's on the street, eating blackberries might not seem that special, but when you're in prison and all you can eat is this fucking garbage that they serve you that's several steps below dog food,
The worst
eating
goy slop on the planet.
yeah, eating blackberries or whatever, any kind of real food is just like it's a revelation.
Yeah, I have to imagine. As far as, getting back into society and reintegrating and everything, how's that been for you? How is your life different now in the way that you live your day to day than before you went into prison?
Um, I mean, it's kind of hard to say because I mean now I feel like I have this massive weight on my shoulders. The felony conviction. So obviously things are much harder for me now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the coolest part of the prison system is you get out, you do your time, you serve your sentence, and then you have this stigma attached to you as far as getting work, doing things like that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we said before. It's designed so that you'll keep coming back to prison, so that you'll never function again on the street.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just don't go making any jihadi accounts in the future.
Oh
I
yeah,
think you
for sure
probably won't
not.
reoffend. You don't strike me as somebody that would.
Yeah, for sure, I'm not going to be making any jihadist accounts in the future. I mean, I'm still doing like the persona thing to some extent, maybe not as prolifically as I did before. Reddit actually shut down the 4 accounts that I had made after my arrest. I don't know why they got shut down, but it was probably like Bardfin or one of the tranny jannies caught
Oh,
wind of
definitely.
it. Yeah.
Dude, it was one of the tranny jannies that still holds on to like the against hate subreddit shit, like Bardfin. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there right now. It was definitely Bardfin, one
Yeah,
hundred
and
percent.
I realized later that I had tried to post in a subreddit that Bardfin was a moderator of, and I didn't even know who Bardfin was really at the time, but now I do. And apparently, I've been living rent free in this crazy middle aged pervert's head for the entire time that I've been in prison. Bardfin still, to this day, regularly makes these insane rambling tirades about me and posts them on Reddit.
Yeah, Bardfin, who by the way is a convicted wife beater. He
Oh yeah, and child abuser.
pre-transition kicked the shit of his wife. Yeah, and child abuser. You're living rent free in his head. That's an accomplishment right there. You should feel good about that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, and like the thing is, like, we talked before about the wing cucks, the people that try to that live in this world where it's an us versus them mentality, and anything and everything that even slightly transgresses against their ideology is this boogeyman villain, and that's exactly the mentality that someone like Bardfin has. You know, it's much easier for Bardfin to believe that I'm part of this, neo-Nazi terrorist cult who wants to exterminate all trans people or whatever the fuck he or she or it thinks I am, than it is for he or she or it to accept the fact that I'm really was just someone posting stupid shit on Reddit to piss people off.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I saw that they took down you tried to do an AMA on Reddit and they,
Yeah, I was planning
immediately
to.
swept that shit.
Yeah, I was planning to do an AMA on Reddit, and they nuked my accounts before I was able to. So I had to do an AMA on this shit posting image board called Soyjack Party.
Yep, the Shardy.
Yeah, I that didn't exist when I was on the street. And what's funny is some of the older Gen X and Boomer journalists that I've spoken to, they told me they weren't even able to read through that thread because there was just so much shit to wade through.
Dude, it is really funny going on Shardy. It's like, I don't know. It's like being a caveman. Everyone's just kind of grunting at each other. Like, if you don't understand, like, the lingo or whatever, there's just no fucking hope. It's like another language.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I don't even know what to call it in terms of like, is it post irony? Is it post irony? I mean, it's on a whole nother level. It's something else.
There's a few levels of irony baked in there. I think even I'm too old for Shardy now. Sometimes I try and go on there. I'm just like, well, I don't get it. Fucking want to yell at them to get off my lawn.
Yeah, and like you'll like I don't know if did you read the thread I posted on there?
I did, yeah.
And like there was like at least half of the thread is just these completely unrelated, just bizarro memes of like skibbity toilet and just distorted soyjack faces and just random gibberish. And I mean it's I've now learned that thread is actually mild compared to the average Shardy thread. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you're some boomer or Gen Xer and you're trying to read through that thread, I mean it would be like it would be like one of us trying to read Chinese. It's not going to happen.
And totally incomprehensible. I think that's kind of the point of it too, though, is, kind of the in lingo like that. They can't have their fucking parents or boomers watching over their back, seeing what they're doing.
Yeah, they don't want the media people like the ones I was talking to understand what they're talking about.
Right, yeah. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up right about here. Joshua, I want to thank you for your time. I think this has been a really nice interview. I want to ask if there's, anything else you want to get out there, any thoughts that you've been mulling around for a while, anything to say to the Grillisha out there, the loyal Grillisha listening with their breath baited.
Don't do drugs.
I don't know if I can. That works. I don't know if I can co-sign it, but that's a-okay. And with that, peace out, my Grilla.
Everything cooler, long as I'm not Laura Loomer. If you think I'm not number one, I done spelled that rumor. Hit the victory royale on some motherfucking coochie. Default dance on a bitch. Hit the default dance on a bitch. Floss dance while I'm flossing in a whip. Victory royale when that chopper hit. Self-incrimination, I have no participation. News keep asking, I don't say shit. You can't have my conversation.